In last week's video, I showed you how to get AVD Hybrid running on Hyper-V with lots of manual steps. In this week's video, I'm going to show you how to get AVD Hybrid running on Nutanix with Nerdio with lots of automated steps, right? So we're going to go through the whole end-to-end process. We're going to show you how to import an image. We're going to show you how to create a golden image. And then we're going to basically show you how to get Nutanix connected onto Nerdio. And then I'm going to go through the whole process of creating a host pool, create some session hosts, and then logging onto it. All right, so as you saw from last week's video, there was a lot of manual steps involved with getting AVD Hybrid up and running with Hyper-V, but wouldn't it be great to have that solution totally automated? You can do. So that's what we're going to focus on in today's video. So I'm going to show you full end-to-end how to get this up and running, right? So we're going to show you what you need to do in the Nutanix console, what you need to do in the Nerdio console, and then we'll fully test this end-to-end. So I'm going to do this on AVD Single Session Desktop, and we're also going to do this for the server RDSH operating system as well. If you need to do multi-session, not Windows 11 multi-session, by the way, just server multi-session, then please watch this till the end because we're going to go through those two scenarios. So that's what we're going to be achieving today. So by the outcome of today's video, hopefully, if you do use Nutanix, if you do use Nerdio, then you'll be able to use this as a step to basically implement this stuff end to end. All right, so let's actually get into the console and let's get this done. So before we get stuck into it, let's just have a quick recap of what the architecture looks like. So this is the general architecture that we're looking at here. So you still got your Azure subscription, right? You're still using Azure as your kind of identity. You still have your Nerdio deployment, but the difference here is we're actually communicating with Nutanix on-prem using APIs. So you can see within the diagram, we're using the Prism Central version 4 APIs, and we essentially hook the Nerdio APIs up to the Nutanix Prism Central APIs, and that's how kind of Nerdio will communicate with Nutanix. And then essentially within the Nerdio console, we'll tell Nutanix to start creating VMs, register session hosts with the host pools, configure FHOtics, all that type of stuff, right? And so that's the general architecture. So from an Azure Virtual Desktop perspective, nothing changes. From an Azure perspective, nothing changes. Essentially, all we're doing is we're linking up Nerdio with Nutanix and then automating that whole end-to-end provisioning process. So let's go and look at the prereqs and see what we need to do to get this up and running, and then we'll head into the console and start doing some stuff. All right, so now let's look at the prereqs for our on-prem infrastructure as in Nutanix. So obviously we need to have Prism Central deployed, and without Prism Central, we can't talk to the APIs, and we need to have Nutanix AOS 7.3 and the 4.1 version of the APIs, and then the hosts themselves, AHV, must be running 10.3 or later, right? For the Microsoft requirements, obviously still normal stuff where we need Nerdio deployed, obviously, to manage all this stuff, but you need Azure Arc, you need Entra ID, which you'll have, Azure Virtual Desktop, and also an Azure subscription, identity. So we do need on-prem Active Directory, right? But you need to have a image template in Nutanix, which is Sysprep. So for your Windows single session desktops, that's going to be Windows 11, ideally 25 H2 Enterprise. If you want to do multi-session, that's going to be Server 2025 RDSH, not Windows 11 multi-session. So Windows 11 in multi-session is not supported on this solution. Okay, so that's essentially the prereqs. If you've already got a Nutanix infrastructure running on-prem, you've probably met all the prereqs already. And I guess the key thing is we just need to make sure we've got that communication link between on-prem and Azure via an express route VPN or whatever, or site-to-site VPN or whatever you want to choose within there as well. Okay, so that's the prereqs done, and we've actually got a Nerdio KB article, which I'll put in the comment section, which shows you that, but we'll go through and set all that stuff up now. All right, so that's enough of the theory. Let's now get on to implementing the solution. So the first thing we need to do is to go through all the prereqs in Prism. So we need to create a service account, okay? So let's go ahead and do that now. So what I do is, first of all, we need to be within the admin center in Prism, okay? We need to go to IAM, and then once we're in IAM, we go to identities, okay? And then if you head over to the right of the screen, we will just go to service accounts, okay? So this is where we create a new service account. So click on add new service account. So we're going to call this a YouTube test as an example. YouTube tests, then description, this will be used for Nerdio. Okay, so save and create keys. So that's basically going to create that service account. So we don't have any keys associated to it, right? So we need to do that. So click add new key, objects key. and then key name, so YouTube test key, and then we just click generate key, right? So the thing with this here, I'm just going to click expires. Don't do this as best practice, obviously. You normally put an expiry time in there as well. So click generate key, and that's basically going to create me a secret key. So we do need that. So just save those keys into a secret place that you've got, right? So you create the access key and then the secret access key. Obviously, I'm going to delete these afterwards, so please don't try using these. But yeah, you generate these keys and then you can download key details as well. Okay. All right. So now that we've got that, we need to basically assign that service principal or that service account permissions within Nutanix itself. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now that we created the service account, we need to give it permissions within Prism itself. So we do this via authorization policy. Okay, so I'm in the Prism console. Then we basically go to create authorization policy. So I'm going to select the admin role, or admin, so Prism admin. Okay, well, then we're going to select next. Give this full access. Now, obviously, in a secure environment, you probably restrict this down a bit, but just for the sake of the demo, and we'll just give it God admin rights. But yeah, in a production environment, you probably want to look at basically scoping down to whatever you need it to be. We're going to click next, local user, then we're going to select service account. So that would just be the account that we just created, right? So YouTube tests, and then click save. Okay, cool. All right. So basically what we've just done, we've created the service account within Prism, and then we're basically given the Prism service account scope to be able to do stuff within the Prism console. So what we'll now do is go over to the Nerdio side, give it the permissions it needs there, and then link the two together. The next thing we need to do is to link the Nerdio to Prism. Okay, so to do that, we head over to the Nerdio console. So let's do that now. So within the Nerdio console, if you go to settings, environment, and then integrations. Now, at this moment, you need to have private preview enabled. So you won't see this by default. But essentially what you have to do is you basically need to point it to the Prism Central configuration. Okay, so to do that, what we basically do is click add. So here's one that I had earlier, just to show you as a demo. But we basically just click add and we put the name of the configuration in there. We put the base URL. So that'll be the host name of the base URL. So that'll be the Prism Central address that you put in there as well. You put the port, which is 9440, and then we put the API key, right? And so this will be the API key that we just generated within the Prism console. And so Prism knows from that API key what that service account is, and then they'll use that automatically. So here's one that I did earlier. So you can see here, this is what I've got within my environment, and this is my URL, and this is my IP address for the environment, for the Business Central. So we also need a client app, right? And we need this to run the Azure Arc onboarding scripts automatically. So let's go ahead and do that now. So we're in the Azure portal. So we basically need to go to app registrations. Okay, so we go into here, and then we basically need to create a new registration. So click here and just put this, whatever you want to call it. So Nutanix test 1, 2, 3, for example, single tenant only, directory, and then we basically just click register. Okay, so that creates me a client app within Entra ID. Okay, so what we'll now go and do, we'll actually configure this client app, or we'll give it some permissions which it needs, and then we'll generate a secret for it. Okay. All right, so let's generate this secret. So if I go into clients and secrets, I'm going to create a client secret for it. So new client secret, and let's call this Nutanix test. Okay, add. All right, so this is my secret ID. So we need this. So now what we're going to be basically going to do, we're actually going to link that within the Nerdio console. So we have to see those within there. So let's go and do that now. So you'll have an add button on here. So it needs the name, the app ID, and the app secret. Okay, but here's one that I did earlier, but you'll just put in these details which you had from here as well. Okay, so that's those linked. So what we now need to do, we need to go and give it some permissions. Okay, so I'm going to do that now. All right, so you can see from the permissions, what we need to do is on the resource group, we need to basically give that app registration the Azure Connected Machine onboarding permission, right? So let's go and do that now. So basically what I would do is within the Azure portal, so if I go to resource groups, and I've got a resource group called AVD Hybrid or Nutanix host pools. So let's use Nutanix host pools as an example. We go to access control, and then we basically, if I go to add role assignment, and then it's called the hybrid. It's the Azure Connected Machine onboarding. Okay, so Azure Connected Machine onboarding. So this is the permission we need here. Click next, and then basically the one that we just created, and we just select that within here. So if I go back to here within there, so that's going to be Nutanix app, right? So if I do a search for Nutanix app, see, that's the one that we just created. Okay, so let's just select those two as an example. Click next, select your role. This is permanent. Click next, and then review and assign. Okay, so that basically gives it permission to do the Azure Arc machine onboarding, right? So just to reiterate, you need that on the resource group that you're going to create this hostable object in. Okay, so make sure you do that, otherwise it won't work. So first step we need to do is to basically import some ISO images so we can actually create some VMs. So if we head over into the Nutanix console, what I can do here is I can click on import image or add image. So if I click on add image, I can go to add file, and then basically I've got some ISOs that are downloaded here. So I've got Windows 11 and Windows Server. So just to reiterate, if you want to do single session desktops, you use Windows 11 Enterprise. If you want to do multi-session desktops, you use Windows Server 2025. So if I wanted to import an image, just select one of these. I click open, and then it's going to go ahead and import that image, and then I can basically use that image to create a VM. Okay, all right, so I've already done that, so we don't need to go ahead. So we don't need to do that. So what we'll do now is we'll actually go create a master image, and then you essentially need to run Sysprep on that master image. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that now. If I go to VMs, and you can see here, I've already got some VMs which I was using as a template earlier. So if I just head over into the Nutanix console, what we now do is we go to create VM and just call this master image test, for example. I'm going to create an optional, so image, a number of VMs, so create one, number of CPUs, so I'll do it as 4 CPUs with 1 core per CPU, and then we're going to create it as 8 gigs of memory. Advanced settings, yeah, we don't need any of those, so we need a disk, obviously, right? So we go to attach disk. I'm going to create this as a disk, allocate storage container, default container, and then I'm going to create that as 128 gig, and then I'm going to create that as a SATA disk. It doesn't matter too much what you put in there. All right, so click save, and then we'll go to attach disk, and then we're going to create CD-ROM as well, and then we're going to create a empty CD-ROM, and then again we're going to create that as a SATA disk within there as well. Okay, cool. All right, so that means we've got a hard disk and we've got a CD-ROM. We're going to attach it to a subnet, right? So click subnet. So in Nutanix, they've actually pre-created this subnet. So this will be the subnet that those VMs get created on. So I'm just going to select that LAN 10. This is my default LAN, which I've selected, and then assign with DHCP. Yep, okay. Click save. So now we've got a NIC attached. And don't forget, you need to select secure boot as well, right? It's within Windows 11, and we definitely need a secure boot, and then attach with a VTPM, otherwise Windows 11 won't boot. So click next for that. So we need to select UEFI BIOS mode. Categories, put the time zone in there. I'm going to put that as London, so that's fine. No guest customization yet, that we don't need because we're going to run Sysprep manually. So no guest customization. Click next. Okay, so now our VM is created. So if I just refresh that screen, we should see our VM pop up and appear. The machine is powered off, so I'm going to power that machine on. And then we are going to go ahead and connect to the console. And then we need to mount the ISO, right? So what we'll do here is we'll just mount ISO, and then we're going to select the Windows 11 Enterprise, and then we're going to select that CD drive, but we're going to select Enterprise here as well. Click mount. All right, so now that's mounted. What we need to do, we need to restart that VM. All right, so we're going to do reset. What goes in there? And then we need to catch it quickly. Okay, so that's now booting into the setup. So what we'll do, I won't bore you through all this, but we'll basically just go through the normal setup process. So go for United Kingdom, install Windows 11, etc. So here we select Windows 11 Enterprise, accept, select the disk, and then install. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and install now. So I'll let that go through, and then I'll be back when that's complete. And then basically what we're then going to do, we're going to run Sysprep. We'll create a VM template from that. And then once we've done that, we'll then be able to go into the Nerdio console. And then we'll go ahead and create some session hosts from that and then connect to them. All right, back shortly. All right, so the one issue that you'll come across is by default, we can't detect the NIC, right? So you'll get to this screen here where it says, let's connect you to a network. So what you actually have to do now is you have to mount the driver for this. So if I go to Nutanix VirtIO, right? So just select that and then just click mount and then go to install driver. What I should have in here is if I go to Windows 11, x64, select folder, that's going to search for the driver. It's now found the network and it should let me continue. Okay, so click next, and then that's going to go ahead and continue installation. So make sure you do download that, because if you don't do that, essentially you won't have any network connectivity, right? So we'll be back soon. One of the things which we need to make sure that we do, we need to disable BitLocker, okay? So we can't have BitLocker on a VM. So the way to do this is we need to go to manage BDE and then basically turn this off. So I go to manage BDE/status. You see on here, BitLocker is enabled for use space only, right? So basically, we just need to go to manage BDE and then just select off, okay? And that basically gonna disable BitLocker and then decrypt it. And then once we've done that, we can then basically go ahead and run the Sysprep. All right, so we can see here that the BitLocker has now finished decrypting, so that's completely disabled. So now what we need to do is run the Sysprep process. So you can see I'm just running Sysprep Gemini, shutdown and mode VM, okay? So we'll kick that off and then the VM will shut down and then we'll be ready to turn that into a template. Obviously at this stage as well, you install any software that you need. So if you've got any business applications that you need to put on, or if you need to run any optimization scripts, this will be the stage that you go ahead and do that. Okay, so that's now going to go ahead and run the Sysprep process, and if that completes successfully, this VM sub shut down, and now I'll be ready to turn it into a template. All right, so you can see the Sysprep is completed. That machine is now shutting down. So once that's completed, we'll then go ahead and turn it into a template. So we'll head over to the console and do that now. So we're back over in the Nutanix portal. So I'm going to go click here. So master image template test. So this is one that we created. So I'm going to right click on that and go to create VM template. And then I'm going to call this YouTube Win 11 25H2, for example. Okay, and we're not going to do any customization, and then we're just going to create a test description for that. So master image for single session. Okay, I'm clicking next, and this is just the template default settings, which is going to have 4 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM. The time zone is going to be London, UK. So just click save. Okay, so that's going to go ahead and basically create that template, right? So once that template's created, that means we can now go into the Nerdio console and start creating a host pool and an image. So let's go ahead and do that now. All right, so now we need to create a host pool from within Nerdio. So I'm just in the Nerdio console. So the thing that's changed is we now have this hybrid host pool option here, right? As you can see here, I've got hybrid host pool. This is what I'm going to use to basically to create the host pool with. So I'm going to create a new one just to show you what the whole end-to-end process looks like. So I'm going to call this YouTube NTX test, for example. And the resource group we're going to select is Nutanix host pools. Okay. And desk experience, I'm going to do this as single session. Now, if you were doing multi-session, obviously, and with this server 2025 RDSH, you select the multi-session. But for this one, we're going to do AVD single session personal. Okay. Assignment type is going to be automatic. The directory is going to be Active Directory. And I'm going to assign myself, actually. So assign a user to that. So I'm going to call this WD. So that's going to assign me to that VM. I'm not going to select the app group name, so it'll just select that by default. Okay, we're going to select validation environment. So while this is still a public preview from Microsoft, the AVD Hybrid functionality, and we need to make sure we select the validation environment from within there as well. Okay, so I'm going to click OK. So that's basically going to go and create the host pool. And then once we created the host pool, we can then basically log into the VM and test it. Okay, all right, so we created the host pool. So I now need to go and create a VM in the host pool. Okay, so I'm just go to here, go to manage hosts, and then I'm going to create a new host, right? So click next. I want one host. So the host name is going to be YouTube NTX test. That's going to be a prefix, for example. Set the resource group. So that's going to be Nutanix host pools. Location, that's going to be in UK South. So this is just the host pool resources location. The actual VMs are still on-prem. Nutanix Prism Central, so that's the connection that we set up earlier. Network, so that's the network that sits inside the Nutanix, right? So that's the network that I've got configured within the Nutanix VM template. So this is the template that we just created, right? This YouTube Win1125H2 sockets. So I'm going to create maybe 2 sockets and maybe 2 CPUs. In fact, I'll do 4 processors and 4 vCPUs, for example. We'll do RAM. So I'm going to do with 8 gigs. This size, we're going to do it as 128 because that's what we did the image with. Disk storage, so this is storage location where it's going to store the disk on. So we're just going to set the default one that we've got set up here. Categories, we don't have to put anything within there. And then assign users. So here I'm going to select me. So I'm going to select this account here. And then if you wanted to add any tags on there, you'd have those in there as well. In fact, now I'll do 2 sockets. So what that's going to do is it's going to create 1 session host in the personal host pool. It's going to assign it to me. It's going to be 2 physical CPUs with 4 vCPUs. And we're going to have 8 gigs of RAM and 128 gig disk. Okay. All right. So if we click the OK button, that's going to go off, and fingers crossed. What that's then going to do is then I'm going to start creating that VM. So we'll also head over into the Nutanix console as well, and you should be able to see pop up within there. So I can see here it's connecting to the API, right? So this is the Nutanix Nerdio API. Let's go through. So we can see that's successful, and it's actually going ahead and creating the VM. So now, in theory, what I should see if I pop over into the Nutanix console, I'll see this VM pop up. So if I go into here, and there you go. So that's the VM here. So YouTube Nutanix EF, like that's the random name that it's put on the end of it. And if you actually go onto the VM as well, you can actually go to the console. It's not powered on yet, but when it's building, you'll be able to see what's actually happening on the console as well. So if we go to start VM, so that VM is now powered on. And if I go to launch console, we can actually see that VM powered on. And then it will go to start kind of through the build process as well. That's the VM booted up. So yeah, with that surely, I'll show you a bit through the build process, what's happening. And then when that's finished, we'll log on and do the test. So that job has now finished. So if we just go into here, we can actually see everything's happening here. It's got the AD config, it's started the VM, it's registered the VM with Azure Arc, it's joined Active Directory. And one thing to mention is, you see here, it took ages to join, and what was actually happening here was the machine actually joined Active Directory, but Azure Arc was taking a long time to sync back. That's quite a common problem, so something to be wary of. So yeah, it's installed all the VM's configurations, it's installed the AVD agent, and it's then registered the host against the host pool. All right, if we go into the host pool within Nerdio, we can see there we've got this VM, so we can see we've got 8 cores. Got 8 gigs of RAM. It's showing this on the VM is unavailable at the moment, so we'll have a look at that in a second. It's also showing the SSX agent as not available, so we'll also have a look at that in a second as well. But sometimes it does take a while for those information to sync. We'll just come back here. If you go into Azure Arc, as you can see here, these are the extensions. So let me just refresh that because they're updated now. So you can see that's the extension that's actually joining Active. So Azure Virtual Desktop, and you can see here the extension which is actually doing the domain join as well, right? So that's essentially how we do the domain join, and that's essentially how we join Active Directory host pool as well, because it uses those VM extensions via Azure Arc to do that. Obviously the issue is now we are not seeing the AVD agent and the SSX agent on the VM. So what we'll do is we'll jump onto the VM and we'll have a look at that and we'll see what's going on. The agent is still there, but it has deployed the SSX agent, so that's there now. But the machine is still showing as unavailable. So this is something which I noticed when it was in private preview. What the issue is, if you actually go onto the VM itself, and we can see their remote desktop is actually disabled, right? You can either set this by group policy or something, but definitely need to report this as a bug to Microsoft. But and essentially, you just flick that to on, confirm. Basically, that means that this should now work successfully. So if I just go out here and then just log off on this VM. So I'm at the console at the moment on Nutanix. So if I just sign out from there, and in theory, what should happen now is if I go back to my Nerdio console, it should, if I just refresh that screen, it should now show as available and enabled. Yeah, there you go. So that's enabled me to connect to the VM. So what we'll do now is we'll go into the Windows app and then we'll jump onto that VM. Alright, so I'm logged into the Windows app. So if you go down here, so you can see here, this is the host file that I created, YouTube Nutanix test. Okay, we'll launch that and then we'll, fingers crossed, it actually connects to the actual VM itself. So let's go on to there. So this is me connecting from my Windows app onto a Nutanix VM hosted on-prem, and there you go, that's me connected. So yeah, so there we are, we are connected onto the VM. Let me just drag this across so you can see it. And you can see here, it's basically showing that, yeah, I've got all this bandwidth available. It's using new UDP multipath, and I'm going straight onto the VM from there as well. So yeah, that's it. So this machine, so if you go to Task Manager, this machine is actually hosted on my Nutanix infrastructure, hosted in my house. You can see that Intel Xeon. All right, so yeah, there you go. We are connected to my Nutanix VM hosted inside my house through the Azure Virtual Desktop Windows app. So it means that essentially we can now, all those workloads which are sitting on Citrix or Amisa, which are hosted on Nutanix, we can now migrate those onto Azure Virtual Desktop and manage those via Azure Virtual Desktop without having to pay those Citrix or Amisa license fees. But it also means that if I want to host my VMs on-prem, I've now got an enterprise solution which I can use to do that. Very cool. So yeah, I hope you found this video useful. If you did, please click subscribe, and I'll see you for another one next week. Thank you. Bye.